I would like to introduce you to Andrew Faust, who's a decades-long educator in permaculture, ecology, and water restoration and watershed level thinking about planning, and along with a couple of his other partners, the head of the Permaculture Living Lands Trust.
Is this my speaker? Yeah, hey. Thanks, Bridget.
Not so close, back up.
All right. Yeah, my name's Andrew Faust. A good number of folks in this room probably I've met. And I've been teaching permaculture design for a lot of years. And one of the things I've really been, I don't want to have to stand right here. One of the things that I've really been focused on a lot is how do we train people up in a new way of farming, a new way of thinking about what does it mean to have some kind of economy that's truly by the people and for the people and not by the corporations and for the corporations. And what happens with land, it turns out, is not something that generally we have a lot of good examples of in terms of something that we might call like sustainability. In the United States, we're largely a corporate industrial dominated landscape that is held hostage to a market economy that likes to extract and exploit natural resources with no concern whatsoever to what future generations might inherit. Fortunately, we have some, equity in the land in private property in the United States on the East Coast that's largely held by many of these land trusts. And having grown up in Chester County, Pennsylvania as a Quaker kid going to the Downingtown meeting where I later learned John Hershey, and through Dale Hendricks and Buzz Ferver and Zach Elfers, who are all advisors for us on the Permaculture Living Lands Trust, because I'm fortunately aware enough to know that I've got a lot of great people in this community who know a lot more than I do about what needs to be happening in terms of creating a real legacy for the work that you all are doing. Teaching is what it's about, and it's about ethics, and it's about responsibility, and changing what happens with land over time. And how do we create landscapes that really bring about an inheritance for future generations that they're going to thank us for? How do we make life easier for ourselves now and in the future? And what does that look like? And as a teacher, what I've been focused on over the last 14 years is training people in something that usually isn't taught in a place like the 5 boroughs, and that's where I've trained up thousands of students in permaculture design certification. And Lisa DePiano, one of my dear friends and colleagues who's a professor at University of Massachusetts, teaching methods of permaculture, teaching permaculture design courses. Maybe I do need to clip this back, don't I? Oh, thank you. And really changing culture has been more of my focus, say, than thinking about what we can do with terms like ecosystem services and agroforestry and added value products and TFPs and all of this kind of thing. That's important, but largely something that I think lacks longevity. And why I like to put this emphasis in front of you all as nut growers and nut enthusiasts of design is to understand that what we need to start to have is a design strategy as a community about how we're going to protect these plantings. And to realize that also there's a real lack of training centers, and what we're exploring with some property owners here is how to have their legacy of these curated crops and tree crops that permaculture is one of the few disciplines that says, hey, trees are a really important part of farming and agriculture, but we need to do it in a way that mimics wild ecologies. We're not going to do it in monoculture cash crop hybrid plantings that ultimately can't really naturalize over time. It's not to say hybridization isn't a good tool, but what we're saying is monocrops is what agroforestry is often leading to, displacing orangutan habitat, and carbon credits are not getting us what we're actually looking for as tree enthusiasts. And again, this is about training people. There's a lot of things happening around, let's say, Glenwood Institute, where I am in the Hudson Valley and in Ulster County, and places like Stone Barns and places like Farm Hub, you'll notice they all focus on annual veggies. That's why probably not a lot of you really have been digging into those types of trainings. But even less available are, say, agroecology and agroforestry trainings that actually focus on a more diversified, nature-based version of how to go about that endeavor. Thinking at a regional scale is something that I've got a recent publication that I'm about to come out with, self-published, that's a book called Earth is Our Home, that's about what I'm calling a new model of economic development that a commons is a big part of, and regional planning for food security based on watershed analysis, hydrological analysis. And these are maps that, typically places like the Nature Conservancy use them to leverage private donors to help protect huge, beautiful natural areas and keep them that way in perpetuity, which is a very critical service that land trusts and conservation groups play. And what the Permaculture Living Land Trust is focused on is how to combine the strengths and insights and legal acumen of the conservation and land trust world with the understanding and ethical focus of permaculture and agroecology and how to create real long-term landscapes that people can harvest from sustainably, responsibly, and taking the tools of conservation to protect whole corridors, whole river basins, and whole communities where we've thought about what does full diet, year-round food supply look like for that community. And we come up with really wild sentences for most people who don't really consider that, hey, perhaps we could grow nut trees and sustainably harvested hardwoods for building materials, and oh, even worse for the carbon fear-mongering, perhaps we'd use some of it for firewood. And we could raise heritage breed animals in riparian buffer plantings where we've done heirloom cultivation of value-added nut trees. This is one of our pilot projects that we're doing in New York State. There's a very robust funding program here called Trees for Tribs. And one of our concepts that we're rolling out is, what's it look like to have a polyculture perennial forest garden ecosystem be what's planted in a riparian buffer? Rather than say, let's simply plant out what are purportedly a pseudoscientific word like native, and instead, how about if we actually plant out wild, resilient ecologies that are adaptable over time in denuded, degraded, deforested riparian ecologies, which we know are in wide abundance, and there's lots of funding and initiatives to do this reforestation work with these native, in quotes, genetics, and no consideration about how these reforestation projects could actually be providing valuable nut harvests, valuable fruits and berry harvests, and sustainably harvested building and fuel crops. So this is from Buzz Ferver's Place, Perfect Circle. Big fan, learned a lot, and continuing to be a student of many of you here to really, as a permaculturalist who is a tree advocate, begin to get as skilled as so many of you are at the cultivation and the grafting. And what I'm here to bring to this community, as much as I can offer anything, and as much as David Harper, my colleague who is not able to be here with us today, but is a very strong advocate of conservation and land trusts over the last 25 years, and our whole team, Lisa DePiano, Bridget Walsh, and myself, what we hope to offer is really a way to take these ingenious plantings that have been developed over the last several hundred years and have them be something that's truly handed off to next generations in ways that you would like to see them available. And the work of having where people have put their equity and their care and their love of fellow humans and ecologies into manifestation, we want those places to become protected, preserved, and become places where people who have put a lot of energy, each person who runs an operation like this knows how much work it takes to make a living doing something with tree crops. And the reality is we want to find ways to make that something that isn't so much work, has multiple sources of funding, and becomes a place that can be, where it's of interest to you, a training and an educational center, where you can have somebody else taking care of a lot of the organizational work about where do those apprentices, where do those interns come from, how is the operation actually managed day to day, and you can just teach people about the things that you're able to do. And we feel that that is really an essential resource that is under-championed, under-celebrated, and under-recognized as a foundation of what a new culture, what a new economy is going to be based upon. Thank you. Thank you.